Michael Boym and his contributions to knowledge transfer from China to Europe. The research is mostly based on his illustrations, which range from botanical to medical and geographical to zoological. Prior to her PhD, Dr. Gillag studied for her PhD at Sapienza University of Rome and her MA at Roma Tre University, where she specialized in 17th century Italian Baroque art. Her most recent publication in the Miscellanea is a study on the natural history illustrations in Michael Boym's Chinese Atlas and on Flora sinensis. She is a recipient of the Hong Kong PhD Fellowship and in 2020 was a visiting student at the Department of History and Philosophy of Science at the University of Cambridge. Today she will talk about visual representation and historical progression of transplanted plants in China before greenhouse farming in early modern Europe. So, thank you for being here and
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for everyone being here. Today's talk is something which is a new direction after my research that I did at HKU. I am basically using Michael Boym work, and I am moving from there towards something which is a new interdisciplinary direction that I'm going to present today. So for today's talk, I am challenging myself, and I'm very much looking forward to have feedback from the audience after the talk. So there will be a Q&A. The title of today's talk is Visual Representation and Historical Progression of Transplanted Plants in China Before Greenhouse Farming in Early Modern Europe. The title itself is quite contradictory, and it wants to be as the whole talk, because I'm talking about transplanted plants to China before greenhouse farming in Europe. So we are talking about two different continents, and let's see how I can connect this obviously contrasted situation. So let's start with the voyages of discovery. Obviously, I will talk later on about Michael Boym, but looking to how Europe expanded, or Europe connected with the other parts of the world from the late 15th century onwards. We can see on one of the maps, after Columbus' discovery of America, there have been other voyages around the world where the Europeans got a much clearer idea of the different continents and the distances, and how it is possible to travel by sea from one part to another. And here, on one hand, we can look for the different connections that were built between Europe and Americas, and also Europe and Asia. And this also meant that the so-called Silk Road, which was a connection between Europe and Asia before the 16th century, and the route that were mainly used for trading between the two continents, started to decline. This happened for various reasons. One of them was also the decline of the Muslim Empire, the Ottoman Empire, which was one of the important stakeholder to keep the Silk Road safe. So after the decline of the Ottoman Empire, basically, it was very important for the Europeans to have routes towards Asia, which happened otherwise. So the sea routes, as you can see, and what became by the 17th century when Michael Boym came to China 2 times, was the most common one was leaving Portugal or Spain from Lisbon, and going around Africa, leaving Cape of Good Hope, and after they sailed towards Goa, India, and from there they arrived to Macau, and from there they spread, or from Goa they spread to different parts in Asia, for example, Japan or Indonesia, and the Philippines. So this became the main connection route between Europe and Asia by the 17th century. If I look at China and how China was connected with the world at that time, it's the famous Zheng voyages happened around slightly earlier, before Columbus' trip, but certainly it is a proof how the Chinese diaspora was present in the Southeast China, Southeast Asia, in India, and also in the Arabic countries, including also Africa. And later we will see why this is important. So in this slide, I'm basically contrasting what was happening, like how Europe was connecting to other parts of the world. And on the other map, you can see how China was connecting to the different parts of the world. Slightly different periods, but the trading routes, once set, they are alive, for example, there were active Chinese diasporas in the Philippines, in Arabia, in the Arabic Peninsula, in India, which were important also in the 17th century. And here it comes the kind of interesting part of my direction at the moment, the direction that I'm taking with this talk, and is looking at the different world climates. And I'm looking at what is the world climate in Europe, which we can see is a temperate zone, so it's green color. And I'm looking at the Chinese climate, and here I can see as you can see, there are different zones present, from the temperature, which is the same as in Europe, but going towards Macau, towards the Guangdong, Macau, or the Hong Kong area, it actually changes and is a subequatorial zone. As you can see, the color is orange. So this is already a very different climate zone, and it means that the agricultural products are different, the fruits, the vegetables are different, and this is basically stays at the core of what we are talking about today. Here I am showing two maps. The first one is to show the average annual temperature at the different climate zones. As you can see, the European, or for example, the northern Chinese temperature, which is let's say the green and the light green, it goes from -16 to about 10 degrees. And as we are coming down to the southern part of China, that will be the main territory I'm looking at within China itself, the annual temperature is 20 to 30 degrees. So that's a very big difference. And that's what, as we can see, Europe is missing this very hot climate in its own territory. But what we saw before, that through the sea routes, it's connected to these parts of the world. While Chinese have all the different climates, it's also connected to some parts of the world. But as we can see, their active trading actually happens in Southeast Asia, India, the Arabic Peninsula, and Africa. So the lower map will show, and it shows how the different transplantation processes happened and the exchanges, which is often called the Columbian exchange, happened between the different continents. And I'm more focusing on what was brought from North America to the other parts of the world. But here we can look, for example, the pineapple as one of the main fruits I'm going to talk about today. And these fruits were often, like, for example, the pineapple was already mentioned by Columbus Christoph, and it was in Mexico and South America. It's a native fruit from there. What happens is that as we see the climate map, that Europeans are not able to transplant the pineapple to Europe because it's too cold to grow pineapple there. What they do, they bring it to Africa, and then from Africa to India, and from India it arrives also to China. And this is one of the main points of today's lecture, how Europeans who don't have their own land where they can cultivate pineapple actually bring these fruits, among them the pineapple, but we will also talk about, or we can mention also the papaya or the sugar apple among the fruits that were transplanted from North America. The Europeans will bring it to Asia. And in China, these fruits will become an everyday commodity already in the 17th century. So let's see what the Europeans thought about China in the 17th century. I am showing a later painting, but this Francois Boucher painting is actually a reference of this idea of the Europeans of China of a lost paradise. As you can see, this fest embedded in this natural environment where you have all these tropical trees around, and there is this idea that China has everything. China is a rich country. They have everything, which was an important paradigm for what paradise can mean. And so now I can go to Michael Boehm. Michael Boehm was among the Jesuits who came to China mostly with the idea to do missionary activities. But many of the Jesuits actually did other scientific work in parallel. So Michael Boehm wrote about Chinese natural history, and this was something that he cultivated since his childhood. His father was the physician of the Polish king Sigismund III. And so Michael Boehm was born in 1612, grew up in Lviv, which is a city now belonging to Ukraine, but back then it was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And he became a Jesuit at a quite early age. We know that from the will of the father that he wanted his sons to study medicine. There are some Polish scholars who say that the father studied at the University of Padova, which is one of the most important universities for medicine at that time in Europe. Anyhow, Michael Boehm grew up in an environment where his family was a very important trading family in Lviv. The family has its own chapel just next to the cathedral. So they were one of the most influential families in the city. On the other hand, his father was a physician. So he had this complex family background that he was carrying with himself when he was coming to China. As I mentioned earlier, as just Boehm, as the other Jesuits, traveled mostly on Portuguese boats to come to China. So he left Lisbon in 1641, and because of the winds, they had to stop in Madagascar, which at that time was called Caffraria. This is what you can see are actually two watercolors of representing the pineapple that are part of a letter he wrote from Mozambique, from Caffraria in 1642, when they stopped there for 1 month, waiting for better winds to continue towards Goa. And these are so far the first pineapple images we have from Africa, as per my knowledge, and they are extremely interesting. So the letter is a 6-page long letter where Boehm describes Mozambique, the people there, the what they hunt, what they eat, what they trade, and at the end of the letter, he includes some of these watercolors. These are very, very important for me, not only because they are quite beautifully done and executed from a visual perspective, but because, as you can see on the two sides, there are notes, and I'm translating some of the notes now. So on the first image, where you can see the whole pineapple, there is ananas fructus africa optimis saporis et odoris sine nucleo, which means that this is an African fruit. It has good taste and good smell without any seeds. I'm pointing out only some of the notes, but this I think is interesting because he says it's an African fruit. So we will return to this later on. On the other side, where you can see the open pineapple, there is a longer note, which again quite important for this talk. Let me say it first in Latin. He wrote the letter in Latin and the notes are in Latin, and then I will translate it into English. Hic maturus est ceram prius quam adolescat iucundissimus aspectu est nam colores ceraleum viridem rubrum praesefert. Chinensis haec pinxit naravitque quod regno Sinarum multi repereantur, siat qui viderit naturalissime depictum utrumque dicti fructus exemplar. So what this note says is that this is a mature fruit, and it is very beautiful. It has blue and green skin, sometimes even red. And here the most important sentence: it was painted by a Chinese who said that in China, in his country, there are many pineapples. And someone who sees this image can say that it is made very naturally. So this is, as I said, watercolor that was made in 1642 in Mozambique, and it was made by a Chinese person. And so here we can hypothesize either that this Chinese person was traveling on the Portuguese ship, and as it happened, or as part of the Chinese diaspora who was present in Africa from an earlier period of time, was there and had Michael Boehm to do these drawings or these watercolors. My hypothesis is that this person was probably staying in Mozambique and was not on the boat, because the last drawing showing a hippopotamus, which I didn't include now into this PowerPoint, remained uncolored. So probably they had to leave with the boat, and there was no time to finish the coloring. So that is why I reasoned that this person had to stay in Mozambique, and so he was stationed there. And that is quite interesting, because then we can connect somehow the Chinese presence in Mozambique, and also that this person knew that the pineapple by 1642 is very much available in China. And here, as I said, Michael Boehm was interested in natural history. During his stay in China, he collected material. He wrote a book where he mentioned 7 books he wanted to write about, and actually there is only one of them that was published during his lifetime, which is this one that you can see. It's called Flora Sinensis. It was published in Vienna in 1656. Basically, it's a book where he is showing fruits, spices, and some animals from China, and also some of them are available, or he saw them in India. Why this book was always criticized is because it includes also non-native plants. So from a botanical point of view, this book is hybrid, because it contains fruits that were transplanted from America. But knowing that Boehm is coming from a trading family, I reasoned during my PhD that actually this book wanted to do much more than satisfy the botanist, or looking only at native plants. And he included things that had value from a trading perspective, that could be information for Europeans who wanted to invest in one of the trading companies. And that is why we can see also the pineapple that he included in this Flora Sinensis. So what is interesting, that again, something that is different from a traditional natural history book. He's showing 3 kinds of pineapples. And the second one is actually the pineapple, how it is eaten, how it is given to people when once it's killed and once it's peeled and it's ready to be consumed. This is much more like serving the consumerist audience rather than the natural historians. And in the text, as we can see, again, is it in late Latin? I won't read it out, but what is interesting that here he notes that actually it's coming from America when it's like ab Indis ananas appellatur. So that means like Indies was like India, the America, how they refer to it in the 17th century. So he knows by now, probably, although he referred to it in 1642 as an African fruit, by now he knows it's coming from the Americas. He knows the different Chinese provinces, Guangxi, Yunnan, and Hainan, where it's produced in or cultivated in China. And again, quite interestingly, like he always describes how is it cultivated. It was a very atypical fruit in many sense. And as I mentioned, for Europeans, especially in the 17th century, still China was like a very rich country, almost like a lost paradise, where you had where the country had everything. And so here, beside this image, I will also introduce some of the ideas that Michael Boehm wrote in the Ad Lectorem, so at the very beginning of the of this Flora Sinensis, that he wrote basically that the China, or this southern part of China, is in the torrid zone, and it lies between the Cancer and the Rambert. And here the Portuguese tried to cultivate various seeds. But for example, in India, he mentions the soil is so weak that there hardly grows anything. And then he goes and he contrasts it with the Chinese soil that is so fertile. He says feracissimus in Latin, so it's very fertile, that they have both European fruits and also many other kinds. In the 15 provinces, Chinese were able to cultivate infinite kinds of fruits, and when one is not available in one of the provinces, they import it easily. And he also mentioned that the winter arrives in different times at the different regions in China, and this also affects the seasonality of the fruits. He admits that he's surprised in seeing the large variety of fruits and the multiple ways of cultivation techniques different from those known in Europe. And again, quite important, he admires the fecundity of the soil, that he claims that you can always you can always find the fruits in Chinese trees, while in Europe they are only in flowers. So that is how, like, for a Jesuit who was every day reading the Bible, in search for a lost paradise in that sense, which can be allegorical but also literal, for them seeing or encountering China that had such a fertile soil, it was really interesting. And so we have a European who comes to China He arrived to China in 1643, and he writes about the pineapple among other transplanted fruits that were already available in China at that time. And this is, as I mentioned before, the Chinese had very active trading activities, especially from the southern part of China, within the Southeast Asian archipelago. And so this is a painting from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. It's it's a market stall in Batavia. Today is Jakarta, where we can see that at this booth or at this table there are all kinds of exotic fruits, and in the middle you can see two pineapple as well. So this is how the pineapple was actually presented to the Europeans, because as we saw earlier, the climate in Europe didn't allow to bring physically the fruit or cultivate the fruit within the European territory. The only way to bring it to the European audience was to depict it. And sorry. And similarly to the pineapple in Michael Boehm Flora Sinensis, this painting with the pineapple was a way to the Europeans to encounter these exotic fruits with fruit which has this really pompous shape. Again, quite interestingly, the Flora Sinensis was published in 1656, and this painting is more or less painted in the same period of time. Beside the pineapple, it's interesting to note the different people or figures beside the table. We can see how the Chinese person is counting the money, and actually the lady on the side is wearing a traditional Indonesian dress made with local textile. So it's really a painting that presented all the exotic fruits and goods to the European audience. So what I am emphasizing here is that while the pineapple was and became an everyday commodity in China by the 17th century through the transplantation process that happened via the Europeans, in Europe the pineapple was not available in any way to taste, only just to see on depictions. And here there was a very interesting research about the different transplanted fruits to the Linyan region, which is this is the current map, so it's not reflecting the late Ming, early Qing dynasty period, but this is the territory that one of the study looked at, and how the 30 species of American crops that were transplanted here became everyday commodity in this territory. So among them, there is the pineapple, the papaya, guava, and the custard apple, which are interestingly all included in Boehm's Flora Sinensis. Here I am saying in just in a parenthesis that the custard apple is the only one which is was transplanted via Mexico, Philippines, and from the Philippines spread to Asia, while the others arrived, as I mentioned earlier, from Africa, India, and then to Asia. So the study that I am mentioning, and I will show something from there. It's called a study on the spread and impact of American fruit trees in the linear region of China from the Ming Dynasty to the Republic of China. And they looked at different gazetteers from the different periods. And so the cultivated variety in southern China was first introduced by Portuguese missionaries to Macau, from where it spread to Hainan Island in Guangdong and later to Fujian and Taiwan around the mid-17th century. This is a source from in one of the gazetteers in the Republican era, written by Yang Jifu. And then there is an other quote. The Portuguese brought the pineapple to Macau from where it spread to Guangdong and Hainan. Interestingly, Michael Boehm arrived to Macau first. He served in Hainan as well, so he could see the pineapple consumed and present in the different parts of the southern territories of China. And there is a 1617 document about the cultivation of the pineapple in Green Island in Macau. So these are some of the Chinese sources which are talking about the pineapple and the different American fruits transplanted to China already in the 17th century. And this study, it's quite interesting because they created these tables where you can see how in different periods of time mentioning these exotic fruits actually declined. So as much as the pineapple was mentioned based on their studies before 1840, so from the late Ming Dynasty till 1840, they counted 42 times. After that, it declined to 26 and 26. And this, with this, the writers reasoned that because it became such a commodity and normal fruit, that it was not anymore a case to mention too many times. So it's that is something which is quite interesting to see, and also connect some of the European studies with the Chinese studies about the transplanted fruits from America to China. Beside the mentioning in the gazettes, I haven't found any visual depiction of the pineapple in China at that period of time I have been looking at, or I am looking at. So that is something that I will be doing in the future. If anyone knows anything about that, that would be extremely interesting to hear. So here, finally, arriving close to the end of my presentation, I'm showing a painting, which is where you can see the gardener presenting a pineapple to Charles II, the Emperor of England, or the King of England, which was grown in this garden. So certainly why the Europeans could only see on paintings and in books the pineapple and could not taste it and neither touch it, they were working on trying to cultivate it within the different conditions that Europe had. And how they did it. So that is when they started to work on the greenhouses and the hothouses. So which means it's basically artificial artificial room where they can create much warmer conditions through glass walls and glass ceilings, and also with internal heating. So that is this this painting is from the late 17th century, and that is when you can see that things is going to change in Europe, because these greenhouses and hothouses will become much more developed, and later on also they will be able to cultivate in the pineapple in Netherlands, and so on. Obviously, it always remained a very rare and exotic and expensive fruit because they couldn't cultivate in big quantities, but they were able to do so. And this is the final image that I show. This is the Chelsea garden, which is the first European garden having a greenhouse. And I couldn't find the very original greenhouse to show to you today, but here on the at the corner, at the left corner of the image, you can see a small transparent house, and that is how you should imagine the greenhouse. So basically, within the garden, they could create smaller or bigger like environments where they could change the 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 temperature, and they could protect the plant from the external weather changes. So this is a quite interesting print because it shows how flexible, like they created this in very big sizes, almost like houses within the garden, which were just simply like had like glass walls or glass ceilings. But here we can see that obviously they used it also in much smaller sizes. So it was a very flexible technique that the European developed, and this allowed them to cultivate later on exotic fruits in Europe as well. The difference that remained, however, is that for a very long time in Europe, the pineapple remained a very rare and very expensive fruit, while, as we saw in China, it was something that became an everyday commodity and was available at the markets. Thank you so much for your attention, and yeah, I think we can open the floor to the questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for that fascinating talk. And yeah, let's open the floor for questions. Yeah, the questions, you can ask them via chat.
Oh, okay.
But there are no open questions at the moment.
Yeah. I saw there. I mean, I saw there are so many people here, and it would be so great to have a conversation. So please just feel free to ask questions. Don't be shy. Or maybe you have something to share. That's also very good to hear. No.
Well, you said that those on the last painting you had that little mini greenhouse.
Yes.
Was it more like an experimental stage, or did they really just build that always according to purpose? Or did they just experiment with small ones, then they went bigger? Or
They were actually, it's a good question. And I was very happy to find this image because it shows that actually it was a technique which was much more flexible than we thing, because what we have this almost like palace-looking buildings within the gardens, which look quite monumental. But from this print, we can obviously see that they used it also in a much smaller scale. And I believe that can be a much more experimental thing. What was the idea behind to make it simpler, or it was a special species that we don't know? But yeah.
And I could imagine that if you have such a rare fruit or plant also, that you just don't get that many seeds and you want to just give the most for that little
Protection.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it wouldn't make much if you just have like one pineapple that you can grow because they're so rare. I think it would be a bit lonely in a huge greenhouse. No, probably not the best environment to grow them.
I don't. So, yeah, it's possible. It's also, we have to keep in mind that, for example, as you can see on the print, there are all those men who are looking at the different plants. So it was part of a connoisseurship, people who were collecting different species, and they were exchanging. They were they were trading with these different species. So this print is from the Chelsea Garden, which was one of the first to have also the greenhouse system. They had to have many exotic species. So in this scenario, I wouldn't think it was the pineapple alone. But probably when we are talking about, for example, a private person who was exchange, it's much more possible.
No, it is more that I would just think that if you just have a few of those samples, that you would try to maximize to optimize the environment for each of them, right? So that's why you would build more different smaller ones, so that each of them has their perfect environment instead of putting all of them into one big.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's possible. I have to say that I think there is a lot of a lot of research can be done still on the greenhouses. I'm not an expert, but I don't find like there is not much material available on the history or on the development of the greenhouses. So that could be something, and then you can see how they used it for the different species and how they were able to even like create different environments for the different species within the same greenhouse.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
More questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I'm very interested about the Michael's that book Flora
sinensis.
How did he collaborate with the native people to complete the images of plants like that? Because we saw the Chinese characters dipped.
Yes.
Besides that images, maybe the native people will use this name to describe this plant. But I want to know whether Michael knew about the meaning of the Chinese characters and whether he did choices to make explanation of the plants and how to incorporate the native knowledge to his book. Yeah, because we don't know that Latin like that.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's amazing question. And it's really fascinating that he includes the Chinese names of the plants. So first of all, he was for sure. So he was traveling with a Chinese companion, because that he stayed in China, and in 1654, when he left China, he became the ambassador of the last Southern Ming Emperor, Yongli Emperor, who asked him to bring letters to the Pope and the Portuguese king. So, and there is a lot of research done about this, because in the same time Martino Martini became the ambassador of the Qing dynasty. So, and they are both Jesuits. But that's a long story. To remain at your question, he traveled with this Chinese companion that the emperor gave to Michael Boehm at that time, and he was with him during his stay in Europe. He stayed in Europe. He left China in 1651. He arrived to Europe 1652, and he stayed in Europe for 3 years till 1655. And probably in these 3 years, he finalized the Flora Sinensis. And Andreas Chen, we know not too much about him, but there is some the information that we have is that he was from a medical family. So he could help him with the Chinese characters. But if you look at, for example, the characters in Flora Sinensis, they are not very, like, it doesn't give you the impression that it is done by a Chinese person. And that is probably because the book was published in Vienna. He already left back to China, Michael Boehm. So the publication happened in Vienna, where Michael Boehm was not there. And so they couldn't supervise what they were doing. And the engraver didn't know Chinese. So for them, they were trying to follow a character, but they were not obviously familiar with it. So that's why the characters look quite interesting. My reasoning why he included are double. So one is because he wanted to create authenticity, like extra value for his name, by writing a name that no one could read, right? Because people in Europe could neither read, neither understand what those characters were. But it gave credit to Michael Boehm, seeing those Chinese characters, that, oh, yes, he was in China, he came from China, he brought this material directly from China. So that's very authentic. We believe that is one of the reasons. And the other thing is, if we, for example, we look at Ben Cao Gang Mu, you always have next to the image, you have the name in Chinese. So I think for him, and we know that he possessed, for example, Ben Cao Gang Mu, but he used also other Chinese books. So I think that he basically used or copied the Chinese tradition to write next to the fruit the name. He did it in Chinese, and then he transliterated it. I think these are the two things.
Because it's very interesting if regarding to the Chinese characters in that pineapple. The first character is Fan, because the name means some exotic, right? The foreigner things. Fan.
Yes.
But the character, the shape of the character is very interesting. It's not that kind of a normal fan. It's a kind of a drawing.
Yes.
Yeah, drawing. This is maybe response to some situation they don't know the drill maybe don't know whether it's correct to write a Chinese character. Another thing is about the pronunciation of the Chinese, because the pineapple is fan bo luo mi.
Yes,
it's different from the Cantonese.
Yes.
So it's not. I'm imagine whether the native speaker in Guangdong, they will say "follow ma," is a ma, it's not me.
Mhm.
So they use the Mandarin to describe
Mhm.
this fruits.
Mhm.
So it's a like kind of orthodox way to introduce
Uh-huh.
some plants to the foreigners. Yeah, this this strategies is very interesting. Yes, for your findings.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. No, thank you.
We'll just read that out for a moment.
Yes.
Second.
Shall I read it?
No, I read it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so one audience question that we have is Michael Boehm's Flora sinensis not only documented China's tropical flora, but also framed its natural abundance as a land of perpetual blooms. Given that his work blended scientific observation with practical narrative, for example, agricultural techniques and spices, how might we reassess the criteria for evaluating early modern botanical texts? Should their value lie primarily in taxonomic accuracy or in the interdisciplinary, such as Boehm's fusion of ecology, cultural exchange, and colonial era?
It's a great question. Thank you. I think Michael Boehm actually gives us and Flora sinensis gives us the opportunity to reassess what we thought about him. He was often condemned that he's including non-native plants. So that's why from a natural history, from a botanical perspective, it's not up to the standards or it's not scientific enough. And here, when you look at closely, it comes out this interdisciplinary approach that he practiced when writing Flora sinensis, and it opens up other doors as the trading, as what kind of information he was providing to the Europeans, how he was collecting the information in China. So, as you mentioned, this fusion is why actually Flora sinensis is so important, and it allows us to also think about other texts as well, reassess them, and start to think about all these natural history books in a much more complex way and not purely within natural history or botany, and make it more part of an interdisciplinary dialogue. I hope I replied to the question.
Hope so.
And for the mention of the colonial era, I find it quite interesting that China was never a colony, and all the post-colonial, decolonial conversations are quite difficult because there is always some limitations at the end. So this approach to look how actually China, like there were different American plants transplanted into China, it's something that opens up like possible like windows where we go beyond like colonial power systems.
Supposed to stop at 5, right? Okay. There's no other questions, so maybe we just cut it off.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, the time is over. So thank you, Dr. Chilak, for the talk, the audience for attending. And before we close, I want to make some advertisement for the next talk in our online Sinology Fortnightly series, which will be given by Wang Yizhou, a research professor in the Academy of Visual Arts here at Hong Kong Baptist University. On the 22nd of May at 3:30 p.m., she will talk about reshaping a capital city, mapping and displacing pleasure quarters in Ming and early Qing cities of Nanjing. Well, I hope you can attend then as well. And again, thank you very much. See you next time.